Grant, how you doing?
Good.
Welcome to the podcast, finally.
Thank you for having me.
A 6-year-old would be a record young person on the show.
Should we try to get him in?
If he wants to come in.
Say no.
I think what we should do is ask him what Bitcoin is, or ask him
or what Bitcoin did.
how many Bitcoin are there, just to see if I coached him well enough.
I don't think he wants in.
No, I don't think he's shy.
I am going to have Ben DeWall's daughter on. So I was out at BTC Prague. Did you hear about her presentation?
No.
She's fucking 12 years old, right? And Sailor's on. And they put her after Sailor, which I thought was particularly brutal. Anyway, she's 12 years old and she's backstage. And I was like, you okay? She said, I'm a bit nervous. I was like, yeah, you're thinking to myself, you're going after Sailor. I would be nervous. And she walked out, 12-year-old. I'm not joking. She killed it. She absolutely killed it. It was mind-blowing how good she was and how confident she was.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so we're going to get her on the show.
That's great.
There are a few kids in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Prince's daughter.
Prince's daughter.
Yeah. We forced my boy to be in a show with Sailor.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things. I like seeing people bring their kids around, because I've been traveling nonstop, for a couple years, and I leave New York, and my kids are always like, "Oh, Dad, are you going to Bitcoin work? Like, can we come to Bitcoin work?" And I'm like, "Yes, I want to take you to Bitcoin work. I want you to just come. You're going to sit on your Nintendo Switch the whole time, but it's cool to experience it and see the people, and just they're the future generation. If it's normal to them, then that's how we can drive success in the future, I think."
When you embed them in it, they get it as well. So Connor, when he was born, we opened a bank account for him and my daughter, and I just put £50 a month in, which I've been doing since 2004. Which, by the way, if only at some point I'd switch that to Bitcoin, he'd probably be a billionaire if I'd started in 2009. But just £50 a month. So that account has £12,500 in. And the rule was, when you finished school or university, it's yours. And he quit uni a couple of months ago, and he just came to me and said, "Dad, can I have my money now?" And I was like, "Sure, what do you want to do with it?" And he said, "I want to buy Bitcoin." And I was like, "Okay, deal." And his mum wasn't too keen on it, but I've agreed with him. What I'll do is whatever Bitcoin you get, I'll top it up to 1 Bitcoin. So you can start a whole coin now. Mm-hmm. But we're going to teach you self-custody. You're going to go through all of that, and you're going to do it all himself. He's opening an exchange account, and he's ready to go. But yeah, I was quite proud of him, yeah. I didn't know if it was irresponsible yet, but all your money in Bitcoin. But yeah, he did it. So you didn't bring the napkin?
I wanted to, but I had a lot going on. I've got a newborn. I'm freshly moved. Got boxes in the garage. It's sitting in the garage. I wanted to bring it. I think it's going to be a very cool piece of history.
Danny said you would bring the napkin.
I was convinced you would.
Hey.
I thought you'd bring it.
That was pretty much the only thing I thought of ahead of this discussion was, all right, I got to bring the napkin, but it's just been chaos at my house. And
Marty's out the loop here, by the way. Have you got the photo of the napkin?
I definitely have the photo. I got to figure out when we got together.
Let me have a look. It's in Telegram.
Well,
right?
actually, yeah, it's in our Telegram chat, because I sent it to you saying, "Hey, check out what I've got here."
I wonder if I can make sense of it and if it's actually worked. Was that it? Was that the entire plan?
Pretty much, but yeah, when you look at the napkin, you're like, well, maybe it's not that impressive. But there was the narrative and the explanation behind it, and also I think there's stuff on the other side too.
Yeah, I think so. We'll explain it in a minute, Marty. Yeah. There's also a stain on it.
Yeah.
Was that your beer or my old fashioned?
I don't know, but I had to put I think I put the block height on. Did I put the block height, or did I put the date?
You put the date. So the 12th of October, 2021.
Yeah.
But we put
2021?
2021. Yeah.
Jeez.
So
time really does fly, because it feels like it was probably October of last year.
Yeah.
It was actually October the year before.
Yeah, it was October the year before. That was before I'd acquired the club. It was in that.
It might have even been a different club you were talking about.
It was a different club I wanted to buy.
It's still a cool piece of history.
Yeah, it was, because it was December that I flipped to the other club. The strategy was the same, but we were in that bar at the bottom of the hotel. What's that hotel we used to stay in New York?
I can't remember. I know what you mean. The one in Midtown.
Yeah.
There's so many, but that one was cool.
It's
I
really
remember
cool.
that one. I'd never known about it, but
Refinery,
yeah. So for Marty, Grant came to meet me. He'd seen I'd put out tweets about this football club. And he's like, I want to invest. And I said, I don't want money yet, but I said, I'll explain the strategy on a napkin. So I drew it out. And the way UK football works, or British football works, is the team we've got's in non-league. So you have the professional leagues, which is the Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two. And there's promotion and relegation. So US sport is socialist. You stay, a capitalist country has socialist sport. You always stay in the top division. Well, we're more socialist as a country, but we have capitalist sport. This promotion and relegation is brutal. It can clubs can fall down the leagues and go bankrupt. But it does mean you can buy a team at the very bottom and get them to the very top. And so I met with Grant to tell him I was going to take this team from the bottom to the top. And so what it is, these local non-league clubs, their money comes from anyone who comes to a game and any local sponsors they get. So you get 500 people to a game, they spend £20. Okay, you're going to bring in 10 grand. And that means that's the money you've got. 3 games a month at home, you've got 30 grand to spend on your team, running, whatever. Then you get national teams, so teams who are maybe in the professional leagues, those top 4 leagues, but near the bottom. And they will have people travel a bit further to come and see him. So you might have somebody who supports, what's a good, like a Brentford or a Norwich.
Brentford, a big side though.
Yeah, people to travel a bit further for like a national. You might have, someone might support Bristol but live in London and go and watch them. Yeah. And they'll get bigger sponsors. They might get a national utility sponsor, like gas or electric. And then you get the teams who are international. So Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, they've got fans all around the world. So they have a large group of fans maybe in Asia. And so that drives your revenue. And I said, if we get this right, we can have a local non-league team but get all those audiences. So we get the local audience because we're new and interesting and they want to support us. Because we're the Bitcoin team, if I can convince them to say, this is our team, we do this together, we then have an international following. And so that gives us a much better revenue model. So we have Gemini. They've been brilliant for us. They're our shirt sponsors. They've absolutely crushed it for us. And that's given us the revenue to do what we want to do. That's an international sponsor, sponsoring a little tiny team. I don't even know what these numbers mean.
And every incremental amount of revenue is so meaningful at that stage because, I remember when we were meeting, you were talking about, the players aren't really getting paid or they get paid, $20 a game or whatever it is. And payroll is like that can be the difference between having like a good player and having just someone who's there, a local person who likes to play. And that can be a tremendous driver of success.
Well, I would say 60 to 70% of your chance of getting promoted is your budget. So you can have no budget and the best manager in the world and all the luck, you're not getting promoted. You can have, did I say no budget then? Yeah. You can have the best budget, but a bad manager, and you still might get promoted. And so we've got a great manager and a good budget, and we won the league last year by 9 points.
Why would you get promoted if you have a big budget, bad manager, a bad team?
Because a bad manager can put out 11 players, not know how to manage them, and they're still so good they go out and win. They're just so talented. You might have a guy who scores 40, 50 goals. And so our strategy is, how do we make sure we have the best budget or a competitive budget in every league? And that is by building up local support. We went from 40 people a game to averaging 180 last year, and we had 3 times we had over 300. And so that means your revenue goes up. Can we get international supporters to buy our merch and come to games? Yes, we've got that. And can we get international sponsors? Yes. But the impact of that has been incredible because we are a team, a men's senior team, but now we have we partnered with a ladies team called Bedford Girls and Ladies. We bought them all new kits. This year they became Rail Bedford Ladies. So we now have 250, no, it's more than that actually. It's 275 girls age 7 to adult playing in 22 teams under our name. We've now got a partnership with Bedford Park Rangers, which is the equivalent on the boys. If they became Rail Bedford, we'd have 700 to 800 people playing under our name in our community. And they're all behind us and they might come to the game. So that does our local work. And now we've just got to keep recruiting internationally as well, which is happening. And lots of weird things like Sting's son is a Rail Bedford fan. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so I met him and gave him a jersey. We've got lots of little weird things like that happening. I still don't know what these numbers mean.
Send me a thing and I'll put it on the screen for the video.
Yeah. Hold on.
Where are you guys in relation to Wrexham?
So Wrexham, so those 4 professional leagues, then you go into the non-league. And so the first division is step 1, which is the 5th tier. We start in the 10th. So we're in step 6. We won that. We've gone to step 5. But they just won the step 1 and they're going into the professional league. So they're going to League 2. Most teams, a lot of teams, I say, when they come out of the National League and get into League 2, they immediately get promoted. That's the entire business plan for Royal Bedford. They get immediately into the League 1. I think Wrexham will be a Premier League team within a decade.
Yeah, I don't know what these numbers actually.
£250, 50,
I think maybe
100
150 million. There was like the market, like the addressable market of fans.
150 million.
But I think there's another side to this too.
Yeah.
To the napkin, that is.
Probably makes more sense.
But we talked about it. You laid out the plan.
You tried to invest.
Well, I
was like,
I don't know. Was I the first person to say I think this is really interesting? I want to invest because I heard you on Pomp's podcast, and he was like, "Oh, I'm in. Let me know." You're like, "Oh, I've already got someone who told me that before."
You were the first.
Like, I think that was me.
Yeah.
But we had, as we've been getting to know each other over the years, just awesome spending time together. And I think the grassroots movement of all of this is like the impact that you have on the community is the most, it's just incredible to see. And I think like the idea which you mentioned last night, like Bitcoin as a cheat code, I think that is a really interesting theme that applies to this, that applies to all kinds of businesses. And when we spent time together, I was just thinking like, I love this idea and I'm rooting for you. And I think that there's there's a first mover advantage in this ecosystem in a lot of different ways. It's like, well, who's the first one to do something like this? And I know there's like the baseball team as well, but like you can only have so many initially because if we're honest, the market, like the audience that you're going to draw from that are into Bitcoin, that want to support a Bitcoin team, it's only so big. And so if there are actually 10, 15 different clubs that were all doing this, I don't think they could do it in the same way. So I think there is a first mover advantage to be, that namesake. It's like people want to make the pilgrimage to Bitcoin Commons, people want to make the pilgrimage to Bitcoin Park or to PubKey. And there's going to be more of these over time, but I think the first one has got a big advantage. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm a huge football fan, soccer fan. I've been playing myself for, 36 years. And I want to see it be successful. I was like, I'm going to grab that napkin after. And so we parted ways, and you were going off to meet someone for dinner, and I was going back home to, deal with like diapers or something. I'm like, I'm taking that napkin, and right away I messaged you.
Yeah,
saying,
where is it?
Guess what I got? I'm like, once you make it to the Premier League in however many years, 10 years? Or is it going to be a little bit longer than that?
That's why I said that triggers people.
But I have to figure out a way to preserve it over that time. I wanted to bring it in, but I'll hold it. Once you make it, that napkin's going to be yours.
No, man, that actually stays as yours now. That's one of those things. So the interesting thing about it is definitely a cheat code, and it's a thing that I've been hammering to people because I'm telling you right now, there's people going to be listening to this podcast. They'll have seen Marty Bent, Grant. They're going to be like, the title will be like investing in Bitcoin or something or other. And then they go like, oh, fuck, he's talking about football again. And they get really pissed off. And I keep trying to hammer home this message. Stop thinking of this as football. Think of this as a Bitcoin project. a bit like when El Salvador announced they were going to adopt Bitcoin, suddenly everyone wanted to know about El Salvador. But I think there are people who aren't into sports and football, so they have an aversion to it. I keep saying, forget that. Look what's happening. We have a team which is known as the Bitcoin team in the UK. So whenever we have success, we get pressed towards Bitcoin. We've had the BBC come to our... I mean, the fucking BBC do not go to a 10th tier football team. They don't go to... I mean, they care about the Premier League, Wrexham.
Yeah, barely even the Championship.
Barely even the Championship. And they've come down. We've had CNN in touch. We've had Bloomberg in touch.
You were on my favorite football podcast.
Was I?
Yeah,
which one was that?
The Football Weekly.
Yeah, I've done
I
that.
listen to it every week and have done for years. And Pete was on. I was like, what the fuck's going on?
And then the price of tomorrow, right? Or, that's another podcast we're on. And then we have a meetup before a game once a month. The first one we had, it was standing room only. There were only over 100 people to a meetup in Bedford. And we have Bitcoin stuff on our shirt. Yeah, there's a big logo. People wear it. And so I keep trying to say, you can hate Bitcoin all you want, but this is a project which is orange pilling people. And we do have the pilgrimage. I was trying to find an email. Some guy just messaged me yesterday. He's like, we're going to be in the UK in December. We want to come to a game. For our final game of the season, we had this is the fascinating bit. I'm going to go on a bit here, but this is the fascinating bit, is that we had a local councillor there who came down, this guy called Jake Sampson, and we had this meetup before the game. We had James Lavish there, Lawrence Lepard, Jeff Booth, and James Lavish said, who's travelled more than 100, what was it? Who's travelled more than, I'm trying to remember what he said.
I don't know, 60 miles or something like that.
Yeah, 60 miles come to this, and nearly every hand went up. We'd had an event the night before, 150 people. And this local councillor was like, what? What is going on? And I spoke to him. He said, this is unbelievable. I was like, yes, nobody in Europe is owning Bitcoin. We're trying to do that. We had 150 people coming in for an event. The Swan Hotel is fully booked out. They're spending money here. They care about this. We've now reached out to the mayor. And we've got a response. So we're going to be seeing the mayor talking about our project. We've got, because Bitcoin is so generous and they give us so much money, we've got all these kids now playing in new outfits. We're going to build a training ground somehow, which I'll need to talk to you about. We will build a new ground as well. We will.
This is my favorite picture ever.
Jeff Booth on a roller in a Royal Bedford hoodie.
Thing.
Like Ben Art comes down all the time. He fucking hates football. So with this, we are orange pilling a town and we're telling a country about Bitcoin. So you can hate football. You can get pissed off every time I talk about it, but we're not going to stop talking about it because it's doing a job. And that is the cheat code. The cheat code is we say we're the Bitcoin team. Suddenly there's a swarm around us that wants us to win because they want their team to win. If you bought a basketball team, Marty, and it became the Bitcoin team, everyone would swarm around it. And so when people write to me, they're like, oh, I really want to get into Bitcoin. It's like, you don't need to get into Bitcoin. You need to just attach Bitcoin to what you do. You like running? Start a running club. Make it a Bitcoin running club. Whatever it is you do. So since we've done this, in the last 6 months, I've had 2 other football teams get in touch and say, we need your help. We've had a netball team get in touch. We've had a rugby league team get in touch. We've had 2 racing drivers get in touch. And they're all like, how do we do this? Because they want the cheat code, right?
Yeah.
But the cheat code spreads it. So
yeah, Jonathan on our team, co-founder of 1031, he literally just wrote a piece called like Bitcoin is a cheat code. I think that is the title of it. And he basically used Strike and Fold as 2 examples of how are they leveraging the positive attributes of Bitcoin and the network effect of it as a cheat code to grow their business. And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, it's the power of an open network. It's the power of, enthusiastic supporters and followers. I mean, we saw it when we started talking to prospective investors, years ago. We kept, Bitcoin just captures people, right? Like once something clicks in their mind, usually, and then they're just, they're captured. Like all they can do is read as much as they can, listen to as much as they can, learn as much as they can, and then they want to get involved, and then they want to contribute in some way. And we were hearing this from prospective investors who, they met us, they saw that there was this fund that was going to support the ecosystem, and they're like, yeah, we want to support the ecosystem and invest, But it was more than that. It was like they wanted to contribute their skills, their network, their experience. And so like you can look at our investors, and it's a very diverse group. It's family offices, it's university endowments, it's pension fund money, but it's also just high net worth individuals, it's entrepreneurs. And regardless of what their background was, it could have been, there's a physician who was an entrepreneur, founder of a healthcare company, very successful, raised lots of money, VC backed, and he's like, I have to get involved. I have to contribute my network, my skills. And so we kept feeling this energy that people wanted to be involved. And so we're like, well, how do we harness that and like leverage Bitcoin as a cheat code for our own business? And like, how can we open up the network of the people that we have who are supporting us as investors and let them, collaborate with the companies, or let them collaborate with each other and like drive these interactions to where, maybe an idea pops from, an interaction that they had at a event that we have. So we created this thing called what we call the 1031 tribe, which is basically just that. It's like, it started off as just our investors, but then it's sort of widened out to, friends and the broader network that are connected to us. We bring as many founders that we're backing as possible to events that we do in person, try to do it quarterly and just see what comes from it. It's not like the old world was walled gardens with VC, and like we'll say VC, but we don't even like to describe ourselves as a VC fund. We like to describe ourselves as an investment platform and an investment and support platform for the Bitcoin ecosystem. And the old world with traditional VC was walled gardens, and you have these LPs that give you money, and at the end of the year you'll get a tax statement and you'll get some financial reporting to say how the fund's doing. But like the interactions with the companies themselves, like, no, you're not going to interact with them. But what we found is such passionate enthusiasts, supporters of what's happening in this space. Like, why not unleash that and see what happens from it? Even if it's a deal that happens outside of 1031, we've had that. We've had some of our investors back companies in the space that had nothing to do with 1031. And, we look at Bitcoin as a cheat code for that reason. So we see a lot of
But
cool
you get to
things
rewrite
there.
kind of the rules of how you want to do things, because it's that network effect you have with Bitcoin is great, but there's that weird thing that you can attach to it, is the network effect of an increasing purchasing power. And I find Bitcoin as a very altruistic, very generous. And every 4 years, they all get 10x richer and get more and more generous. I mean, look, just a great example. Iris Energy are one of our sponsors. I was chatting to Daniel, I was explaining to the project, what's happening. I said, and one of the cool things is we have this hardship fund. So if you're, it's £3,000 for the ladies and £3,000 for the men's. And I said, that is for any kid who cannot afford to play football, because they have to pay. And the parents some just don't have the disposable income to buy them some new boots or for them to pay the fees. So that fund exists. Any kid who wants to play football, their parents can't afford it, we've got that money covered. He went, all right, I'll double it, just like that. That's Bitcoin money, just seems to happen because I think everyone knows they're kind of like, there is a bit of luck. We got in, we're glad we found it, and you suddenly got that jump in your net wealth. Let's do some good. Let's spread it forward, and that's what's really happened with the football team. Is that, I mean, like our ladies now, we had a sponsor, Galaxy, get in touch, and they said, look, we want to support your football team. What can we do? I said, sponsor the ladies. They've sponsored us, and that sponsorship is buying new kits for 270 kids, and means we can pay our ladies. We'll probably have the best paid ladies team in the league. It means we might win the league, but it's also, respectfully, it means the ladies are getting paid, which they should, because they were having to pay to play football. And so we're getting to rewrite the script of football, but we're also getting to act entirely in our own way. I mean, look at you, you're not in a suit. You've got your tribe. Have you got our tunnel? Have you seen our tunnel?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, so, like the whole fuck you money thing. We're like, what's the point of having fuck you money if you can't play fuck you football? And so, I mean, I did kind of pinch the idea of, that's our tunnel. And so, when the opposition players can you go to our Instagram? Go to the Rail Bedford Instagram.
And to that point, Bitcoin allows you to do things differently. It's been a lot of fun building 1031. Like Grant mentioned the tribe event, like LPs, investors really like going to that, meeting the founders, and then even within the portfolio, I think where we are in Bitcoin's growth phase and its monetization phase allows a lot of our portfolio companies to interact with each other. And there's a lot of symbiosis, and company like Unchained building security products around multi-sig. They're able to collaborate with somebody like CoinKite, providing the hardware wallets. And I do think there's something unique. Yes, we're an investment platform, but making venture investments, there's something unique about Bitcoin in the particular state that the industry is in right now that allows a lot of these companies to work with each other and really add value to each other.
I think, I mean, I don't know, but I assume that's quite a unique thing as well, like the willingness to work with each other.
Very,
like,
yeah.
I think in traditional industry, I don't imagine people are sharing secrets, but it feels like Bitcoin's very open.
Well, it's not too uncommon with institutional investing to try to draw out, use the word synergies, which we joke about all the time because it's just such like a, it's almost like, it's corporate speak. But, Peter says, well, I'm not in a suit and like, look at me here. But I know my audience, but like I used to be in that world and I've got plenty of suits. And I used to work at a big time investment platform. And that was something that you saw. Like you saw portfolio retreats. So this is not it's not necessarily a new idea that we're coming up with, but I think the value that can be driven from a portfolio of companies in this ecosystem is much more than people generally appreciate. We tend to put all of our thoughts and our strategy out in the open, and we've written about this. I think most people haven't really paid attention to it, but I think in hindsight, what people will see is that actually the synergies, let's say, of a portfolio of companies in Bitcoin that can collaborate in interesting ways and drive value for each other and for other companies in your portfolio is much different than what you would have seen in traditional investing. Like you might have an example of a SaaS focus, like software as a service focused investor that only does SaaS stuff. And they look at this SaaS business in healthcare and this SaaS business in IT and this SaaS business in consumer retail. And they can draw a lot of best practices and leverage a network of people that can provide value across the portfolio. And there's some synergies in that, but it's not the same as I think what we're going to see in this space where you've got Strike collaborates with BitNob and countless other examples that we're seeing. So that's
so we have that too. I mean, we had OpenNode provide our payment rails for Bitcoin at the club. We've now gone to Coin Corner for that. Like we don't just find sponsors. We actually work with them. We want Bitcoin companies to come down and build the infrastructure. My ideal world is in the future. So one of the important things is undersoil heating at football clubs because during January, February, the pitches can freeze. Like, I want to put miners there and use the excess heat to thaw the pitches for the games. I mean, I don't know if the engineering is possible, but it must be. I mean, they're just pipes.
I'm sure you can heat a pitch.
Yeah.
Imagine it's just water pipes under the field, right?
That's all it is. They heat them up. This is our tunnel. So we play like death metal in there.
Yeah, that.
So they turn up and it just puts them into this kind of weird environment. And we keep getting these things like, oh, this isn't how it's done in football. It's like, fuck off, we don't care. So, yeah.
I imagine some people definitely get hyped from this.
Oh, yeah, I love it. So our team love it. They love that this is who we are.
Yeah.
And I think some of the away team just turn up and they're all on like Snapchat and just sharing it out.
Does the away tunnel have like classical music or something?
No, that's the one. That's everyone.
Oh, okay.
They both go through there.
Okay.
So I've been using AI to design the next tunnel for when we do the next stadium. And so then that's the away dressing room. So they just go into this cold black room that just says, "Know your enemy."
These look like comfortable benches.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it like that even when we get a nice one. But yeah, no, look, it's working as a project. We got promoted. We won the cup as well. I think I'm confident the men's and the ladies will both win the league this year. I think we could win it the year after, and then it gets progressively harder. But we've just got to keep growing, support sponsorship and the revenue model. And we have a Bitcoin. We've got over 5 Bitcoin in our treasury now, and right now that's worth 150,000. In 5 years' time, that could be worth $500,000, maybe $1 million. You never know. And
Maybe 10.
maybe 10, maybe 10 million. Yeah. So yeah, it's working. And I appreciate your,
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll definitely make it over for a match.
we'll have you.
And I'll bring a ball boy with me if I can.
Definitely. Well, we're trying to get people over between January and April. I mean, the best one we'll come to is the last game of the season because if we won the league. Anyway, we should talk a bit more about 1031. Good name.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a fine name. I mean, it rolls off the tongue, but it's proven to be pretty confusing for most people who are like, 1031, is that like a real estate? 1031 exchange. I wasn't a real estate guy, so I didn't know what 1031 exchange was. But everything that we did in trying to think like, how do we found a investment platform that supports the ecosystem? Like, how can we align as much as possible with Bitcoin? Like, we didn't name it our names, Andreessen Horowitz. It's not about us. It's about Bitcoin. So, date of the white paper, 1031. Like, once people hear it, they're like, oh, like I should have known. But most people don't realize it. Right,
it's my birthday, so I knew it straight off the bat.
Yeah.
That's what we'll know. Bitcoin has made it when people associate 1031 with the white paper day instead of the real estate exchange.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
If you ever open a UK branch, you have to call it 3110.
Yeah. You know that.
Yes.
We do dates properly.
Yes. Yes. I'm aware. I lived in London for a year.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that part of the revolution? You had to change the dates, change the month and years around when you got rid of us.
Yeah, I don't know.
So what's the investment thesis then? Because it's known that investing in Bitcoin is hard, right? There's a high failure rate of companies. There's a lot of companies I think have created ideas that were right but too early. It's hard. So what is the investment thesis?
The investment thesis, I mean, we're big believers in Bitcoin, and we think Bitcoin is the future. It's a paradigm shifting technology that will be the basis of economic value. When we say the world reserve asset, will it completely displace fiat currencies? Obviously, like, we think there's that potential, and if it's going to increase in adoption over time, then there's going to require infrastructure to be built around it for holders of Bitcoin. So it's products and services for people who come into the ecosystem and want to hold it, use it. Companies that are making the network, bringing utility to the network. And so our plan is to support like those exciting technology companies.
What's it been like for you getting involved, Marty?
I mean, it's been incredibly fun. I mean, I love working with Grant, Jonathan, Matt. Obviously, Matt and I have a long history with each other with Rabbit Hole Recap. It's become a brother. And it's something, I mean, we discussed a lot throughout the years on Rabbit Hole Recap was juxtaposing what was going on in the Bitcoin space. I mean, week in and week out, we'd cover all the developments in the open source projects and within the companies. And then for some reason or another, all the crypto companies were taking a lot of the shine. And that's something over the 5 years that we've been doing the podcast, we've talked a lot about. It's like, how are all these crypto funds raising hundreds of millions, billions of dollars and allocating it towards absolute scams, while Bitcoin companies building actual utility on the only network that matters can't seem to get funding. And so it was a natural progression of what we were doing at RHR, highlighting these good projects, and then individually on TFTC and Citadel Dispatch, talking with these founders and people building out the space. And the opportunity came to join 1031 and actually go out and support these companies financially, it was number one, a no-brainer. Number two, a dream come true, because it's literally all we talked about and wrote about for over 6 years now for me. And it's extremely important. We think that Bitcoin is an imperative as we transition into the digital age. I mean, we just talked about the CBDCs on the interview we just did with each other. Like, it's either that or Bitcoin succeeds. We get digital slavery or digital freedom in the form of Bitcoin. And so being able to support the companies that are making it more accessible, adding more utility to the network is, like I said, I don't feel like I work a day in my life every day is extremely exciting. And I think the work we're doing is extremely important. So it's been great.
But you can see how those crypto funds raise so much money and why it's hard for Bitcoin companies, because the crypto funds or the crypto projects will get into raise their seed fund and do their IPO at the same time without any product market fit.
Yeah.
And deliver huge returns for these investors because they got their allocation early. They could dump on retail. It was the same cycle every time, but with a Bitcoin company, there's no token. You're buying equity in a company that has to deliver a return. You can see the math of both and why the VCs were attracted to crypto.
Yeah.
They're struggling now, though, right? There's not much being raised in crypto at all. I believe.
It's there's a pretty big drawdown in money being raised right now. But to that point, too, that's why we intentionally name our funds low time preference funds, because we go out there and we pitch investors like, hey, we believe the quick gains that happen in the crypto market in this first decade are ephemeral. I don't think they're going to repeat over time. Like, you want to be investing in companies that are going to be providing long-term value for decades, and that's going to force you to lower your time preference and really invest in critical infrastructure that's providing individuals utility and access. And it's a hard pitch because it's easy. The crypto VCs, like you said, what LPs want to see is quick liquidity. So being able to spin up a token, dump it on retail, and return those profits to investors is a good pitch for them. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think that the crypto industry at large has much to show for it.
No, I mean, I remember when it was the peak moment for me when we were looking at, do you remember the multi-coin thing where their investment Solana at one point was the most profitable investment by any fund ever? Was it something like they put 20 million in and turned it to 2 billion? I don't think they exited, so they're probably massively down again.
I think that, yeah, well, I think they
But
did.
it's attractive.
I think they did exit. I think they sold a lot, or at least some of the founders personally. So, I mean, I think they realized quite significant amount of carry from that investment. And
I thought multi-coin were massively down on that one.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure but you definitely have seen, an exodus of capital that's like looking to get into crypto, like broader crypto right now. Not surprisingly, but we used to have this Twitter thread where it was, I would just add to it every time you saw a new fund announcement that said, such and such raises $1 billion for crypto or DeFi, or $2 billion or $500 million. And I would just keep saying, capital misallocation into crypto intensifies. And you would see just one deal, one NFT platform deal raise $500 million. And that's more capital that's been raised for Bitcoin exclusive venture capital funds combined. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of capital that's gone into Bitcoin miners and gone into individual deals like a NYDIG raising $1 billion. But the funds that are focusing only on Bitcoin, like it's less than $500 million have been raised. And you were seeing individual deals every other day that was like that. So it has been an uphill battle, but we think everything that you've seen over the last 12 months, 18 months is validation of the strategy of the focus on Bitcoin, and time will sort of prove that out, because the investments that we've made, we feel very optimistic about the outlook, but it's still early. You got to let those mature and let the companies grow into it. And as the next wave of adoption comes, we think you'll see a lot of success stories.
And in terms of raising, your LPs, do they tend to be Bitcoiners already, or is it people who want to get into Bitcoin who've got capital?
Predominantly, they already were interested in Bitcoin. We talked to lots of different groups that were broadly interested in crypto and failed pretty consistently with those groups, trying to convince them Bitcoin only was an interesting strategy, often. And it's not surprising, because someone who doesn't, they're not deep, they don't, live and breathe this stuff like we do. They don't they're used to diversification, right? Like you diversify in the stock market, and you diversify across asset classes. And coming into this new emerging crypto world, they think, well, let's diversify. We want to be crypto agnostic, and who knows what will be the winner. We should hedge our bets. And like that's often one reason. Another reason is they start to hear the marketing of some of the other things being, newer and faster and more innovative, and they get drawn to that. So most of the time it's rejections. Like a lot of the investors that we have already were interested. We didn't have to convince them about it.
So, okay. And did you find when you were looking at those crypto deals that were happening, did that kind of spur you on? Did that give you more motivation? Were you like, fuck these guys?
Definitely. I think so. Because it's incredibly frustrating. And again, like Grant said, we've been validated. Like the blow up of BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, many of the portfolio companies in our funds benefited from that. You have FTX blow up. People realize they need to take self-custody seriously. So they start buying cold cards, and they start setting up vaults with Unchained. And again, this goes back to low time preference as a part of the thesis. You can look at a Celsius and their model of taking people's Bitcoin and lending it out to the 3 Arrows Capital of the world. And if you understand Bitcoin as a scarce asset that it is, you understand that that's a terrible business practice to be doing. It's very risky. If the 3 Arrows Capital goes bust on that trade, Celsius is screwed. And that's what happened. And we made, just again, using Unchained, I've said them 3 times, but comparing, I think they're a direct comparison to a Celsius where they're doing something very similar. But since we understand how all this stuff works and understand how Unchained is differentiated from a Celsius or a BlockFi via the way they set up the multi-sig escrow wallet and the collateralization rates, and the fact that they don't rehypothecate. Like we made that bet early. We made it a few times, and it was having that conviction early on that like, no, we understand that, yes, BlockFi may be worth, what was it, $4 billion?
$4 billion on their final, $5 billion on their final round.
Yeah, $5 billion Unchained is relatively small compared to that peak valuation for them, but Unchained did the same product the right way.
Yeah, but it's going back to that low time preference and building companies in the right way, building companies in the right way for a future on Bitcoin.
Yeah. And while the bull markets are ripping and BlockFi and Celsius are raising rounds of multi-billion-dollar valuations, people are looking at us being like, oh, you guys are idiots. Why don't you get on this? It's like, we would tell people like, just wait, like something it's going to blow up here. Yeah.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about having the type of backers that we do is during all of that chaos last year, I got absolutely zero calls or zero emails from the investors saying like, hey, what's going on? Like, are we okay? How's the portfolio doing? Like, is our money safe? Which I thought was really interesting. I mean, I wouldn't hold it against anyone in such a turbulent time to just want to feel like things are okay. But to me, that was just a signal that they get it. That this is a volatile space. And by the way, like all this carnage is happening outside of Bitcoin, seems relatively protected, resilient in our space. So that was interesting.
Do you think though you're becoming more of a freedom tech fund? I'm taking what Odell keeps saying to me, freedom tech, than a Bitcoin investment fund, because you are looking at kind of Nostr style investments, right?
We are. I would maybe just phrase it differently. I mean, one of the core parts of our investment thesis is that just like every company back in the 90s became an internet company eventually, right? Like have to interface in some way. Every company will become a Bitcoin company. Like that's something that we say. Now we definitely want to lean into Bitcoin as this freedom tool. Same thing with Nostr. So we are backing companies that are in that space, but we're also backing companies that are originally were neither Bitcoin nor Nostr. They're coming from just technology, different parts of the technology space. There's one that we're backing called StatMuse.
Yeah, Marty was telling about them earlier.
That's originally, AI and natural language processing business, but they're coming into Bitcoin. And so that's another theme that we think is really interesting, is the tech companies that will be the early leaders moving into Bitcoin. And so what does that mean? That means it's hard to define what we are and what we invest in, but the foundation for sure is Bitcoin. But it's, Nostr is relevant. Other technology companies that want to get interested in these, in these categories are also relevant.
Yeah, and honing it on like Nostr as an example, we view it as, again, like synergistic with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So you go back to like the crypto bull market of last cycle, and the big theme was Web 3.0, where you create a token for all these different use cases that doesn't make sense. You just try to thrust a token and say, hey, it's just going to work. The tokenomics makes sense here. When really we think the people pushing the Web 3.0 during the last cycle were coming at it completely wrong, where you don't need a token for everything. What you need to do is combine open source money, Bitcoin, with other open source protocols. And Nostr is a great example of that. It's an open source communications protocol. And by combining it with the open source monetary protocol Bitcoin, you're supercharging both of them. You're creating more avenues for people to get exposure to Bitcoin. And alternatively, you are supercharging Nostr by creating this monetization effect. And this can be applied to RSS feeds, podcasting 2.0. All of our podcasts are on your podcast as well. Like RSS, open source content distribution, Bitcoin, open source money. You combine those. That's true Web 3.0. We are being monetized in a peer-to-peer fashion from our listeners over the Bitcoin network that is combined with the RSS feed that we send our podcasts out on. LSAT, now L402. It's another example, fitting that into the HTTP stack. Vita, what they're doing with SIP and VoIP, they're putting Bitcoin into these open source telecommunication protocols. And so, like Grant said, we think all these incumbent industries are going to become Bitcoin companies or have Bitcoin integrated into their stack. And in the case of Nostr and things like podcasting 2.0, we think that's particularly pronounced when you combine Bitcoin with other open source protocols.
So there's probably going to be deals out there that you're going to take a look at, and they're not Bitcoin companies. They're not using Bitcoin. You're going to recognize that if they were, that could turbocharge or change their business. And you might approach them and say, look, we want to invest, but you don't realize it, but you could be a Bitcoin company. And if you did this, here's your new, it might be a payment service, right, that hasn't adopted Bitcoin or some kind of app. And you could go to them and.
I think AI, I think the convergence of Bitcoin and AI, we're just at the beginning of that trend. And I think, interestingly enough, AI is just blowing up within the last 8 months. And Bitcoin, particularly over the Lightning Network, we were talking about this earlier. We both had Balaji on recently. One of Balaji's first ideas in the Bitcoin space when he was at 21Co was the idea of the machine payable web back in 2015, 2016. And back then, Lightning didn't exist. And so the machine payable web didn't materialize, not only because Lightning didn't exist, but there wasn't really a lot of infrastructure that could plug Bitcoin in. But now, fast forward 8 years, not only does Lightning exist, it's matured to a point where there's robust infrastructure, development kits, and an industry built around the second layer protocol that it can actually provide utility to an industry like AI. So like AI can benefit from Bitcoin over the Lightning Network with gated API calls that really solve a lot of the problems that these AI companies have. And they're particularly capital intensive due to all the energy that they use as well with GPUs, which is interesting that they haven't been called out for that yet. But if you can prevent chargeback risk by settling these API calls over the Lightning Network, that's a massive increase in the margin for them.
Okay, talk me through that. What's actually happening there?
So when
API calls over the Lightning Network, how does that work? What's going on?
So you essentially basically say, hey, you make an API call to something like Midjourney.
Yep.
Midjourney says like, all right, ping the API. I'll go do this task. Now with L402 and LangChain, I believe is like the AI dev kit that people are building on. You basically put in LangChain like, hey, if you want access to this compute, you have to pay the SATS paywall, and then we'll go do the compute and give you the image. And that's much more efficient than paying a monthly fee using a credit card or
Yeah.
debit card that come with chargeback risk.
Yeah, because I think for Midjourney, I'm paying like $70. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be 30.
I might have gone for the.
I mean, you used to see like right when some of these, generative AI tools were getting released, DALL-E and DALL-E 2, and there were these Telegram bots where, you could DM the Telegram bot to say like, create this picture for me, and then the Telegram bot would spit a Lightning invoice to you, and you could pay that, and someone else was paying for the service, and then they were sort of monetizing it. But it's micropayments for compute, and the compute is very capital intensive. And with the Lightning Network, now you can sort of create these new models, which are pretty interesting. Obviously, it's very early to see where this is all going to go, and even talking about how AI is exciting, I feel weird talking about it because like that's the hot new narrative, and like all the DeFi bros and the crypto people. You don't hear about Web3 anymore. You now hear about AI. And so we have to be careful with that. But I think it's, we noticed a while ago that like there's something happening in this like AI ecosystem. And, we started following some of the key figureheads in that space, at least on social media, some of the like real innovators that are building some of these, either these applications or tools or companies. And it felt like the way that they were talking about what was now going to be possible and all the activity that was happening in their ecosystem, it felt very similar to like this echo chamber that we're all in with Bitcoin. But it felt like the people in Bitcoin weren't necessarily like it wasn't a narrative that people were following. It was sort of like siloed, like everyone's getting excited about AI in the AI space. This was a while back, and everyone in Bitcoin is not really paying attention to AI. We just started thinking more about it, and we wrote a piece that talks about some of these implications. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, it delivers value. That's the big difference. If you think about, I think I'm a bit older than both of you, but hopefully not too much older. But if you look at the technologies in our lifetime, I remember pre-internet. I don't know if you guys do, but do you remember pre-internet?
I mean, I remember it. I was very young then.
My kids don't. My kids don't know a world of no internet. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember pre-mobile phones. When I was at school, no one had a mobile phone. And so I've gone through internet and seen how it's changed the game on everything. I've seen that with the mobile phone. We've seen it with Bitcoin. The problem with crypto, the point I went Bitcoin only is when I realized I don't use any of it, because none of it's delivering any value. That I'll defend that slightly. I'm out in Argentina next week making a film. The driver we're going to see, he wants Tether. That Tether is going over a crypto network. It's not going over the Bitcoin protocol. He wants Tether. He needs Tether. He doesn't want Bitcoin. It's too volatile. He needs dollars, and it's the best way to get him dollars. I accept that. But outside of digital dollars, crypto hasn't delivered anything. AI is delivering something. I'm all in. I talk about it a lot. I use AI on a daily basis for writing and now design concepts. I saw a tweet where there's a list of services if you want to build a business, all the different AI tools, Microsoft Designer and another one that builds websites. It's delivering value. It's making people more efficient. It's making us more efficient. I mean, it will get to a point where it can edit the show for us. That's going to happen. It can write our show descriptions. It can do our timestamps. It can do a lot for us. That is real value. That means we become more efficient. So I'm all in on AI.
Yeah.
Scared of it.
I use it every day too. I use Midjourney for the thumbnails. We use Descript for podcasting. We put our files in there, gives us transcripts, gives us clips. And this is only the beginning. This is like a bit like we're at still at the manual phase. It sounds weird of AI, I believe. Like going back to the machine payable web, that idea that Balaji had back in 2015, like with AI agents. So the concept of AI agents, you basically give an AI a task and you set it wild on the internet, and it can go scrape data, like sign into websites, order pizzas, whatever. Like again, going back to adding Lightning to this, like that is what's missing for AI agents to make them as efficient as possible. As you load them up, you give them a Bitcoin wallet with an allowance, and you send them out on the internet. It's like, hey, I want you to get this done. Here's your allowance. And just go spend the Bitcoin where you need to complete this task. Obviously, we're a bit of a way from that end state, but you can see it. It's there. It's clear. Bitcoin, particularly over the Lightning Network, is the only way that becomes efficient and scalable at the end of the day, because you can't give an AI your credit card number and have it go wild on the internet.
But we're definitely going to go through a period of grifters who are going to have tokens to pay AI
100%.
bots. The problem is those tokens.
Ralph Paul's already pitching it. Pitching it to the bankless
I saw that video, and but the problem with that is there won't be. I know we hate this intrinsic value word, but these tokens won't have some pegged intrinsic value that appreciates. It will be some token that has a pre-mine distributed, they'll dump, and it will do the same as every other token, go to zero. Whereas the Bitcoin ones, you know that Bitcoin has a true pegged value, which will over time increase.
Yeah, well, I agree. They're definitely going to try that, but I do think we're at a unique point in Bitcoin's development, particularly on the Lightning Network, like going back to L402. Like they built that spec and that code base to integrate tightly with the HTTP stack, with the internet stack. And from like a development tool perspective, I think like Bitcoin over the Lightning Network actually has a head start there. It's going to be much easier to implement something like L402 into an AI project instead of just some random shitcoin that was spun up, some token that doesn't have a developer community around it, libraries around it. Again, going back to low time preference, like the Lightning community has been building out these primitives for the last 5-6 years now. And we're finally getting to the point of maturation where developers outside of Bitcoin can begin to plug into that. I think, we talk about a lot, like how long will we have these cycles where tokens like blow up and then explode? Like, I think this is a bit contrarian in the space. Matt always yells at me. Says shitcoins are going to be spun up forever. But I do think the maturation of the development tools that are available to people building in the space is at a point where the opportunity cost of going and trying to like force a token into something in the open internet is just going to be too much, when you have all these tools that can do it pretty easily today.
And if there's thousands of different AI tools that specialize in all different things, you need the network effect of a money that's accepted everywhere.
Yeah, you need a standard.
Yeah.
I think there's another problem the crypto bros have got as well, which is the crypto token cycle. The pump and dump is getting shorter and shorter. Mm-hmm. And so you've seen it now, where it just became meme coins. It's like, here's Pepe coin, quick, pump, dump, done. And so it's previously in a previous cycle, you could be convinced like, oh, they've invented some new idea, this token's useful. You could hold it for a few months and can go up in value. The cycle's so short now, so many people got wrecked. I just think that model alongside SEC pressure is just making it almost unviable.
Yeah. And again, we're almost 15 years in. Bitcoin's becoming a brand name. Crypto, like it or not, is a brand name. Everybody knows what crypto is. And there's going to be pattern recognition that comes in eventually. It happened to all of us individually. I started in 2013. It took me a couple cycles to realize, this is BS. And as we move forward in time, like the people that realize that it's BS is going to be larger and larger, to the point where it's like, everybody realizes off the bat, this doesn't make any sense. Does
the AI stuff worry you at all? Because there are obviously a lot of conversations around the ethics of AI, consideration for what is going to happen to the jobs market. The two things on my mind is, firstly, my daughter's 13. We've got your boy here. Am I right to mention that? Mm-hmm. Whatever he's learning at school, it's going to, the jobs market in 12, 15 years is going to be very different. Like, I don't think we can imagine what it's going to be like. So I worry about, I think about that. I think about hopefully AI doesn't find CRISPR and decide to fuck around with us. But I also think about just the massive change to the jobs market. We had Jeff Frost in LA. We're talking about medical use of AI, and they said they're already using it for radiology exams, and they're good. They're not there yet, but you'll get to the point where AI will be doing all the consultancy work for radiology, and so you can see a wave of jobs being lost. Now, with efficiency. There's two theses, right? One thesis is that this is going to lead us towards a more productive, happier society. And there's a thesis that it's going to concentrate wealth into smaller and smaller hands. You as an investor, and you as well, Marty, I'd be interested in what you both think of that.
Yeah. I try to be optimistic about it. For sure, significant disruption, right? Like how does that, you have to think about that as an investor of where can businesses be disrupted, but these are very powerful tools that businesses can use, individuals, kids can use. I mean, with mine, we found some pretty cool tutoring things that are AI enabled tutoring, with math, and my son's loving that.
Dude, my daughter said they had a chat at school. The teachers sit them down and say they cannot use AI at school. It's banned as a tool for doing their homework. And I turned around to my daughter and I said, if you want to use AI, you can use AI. If that's going to make you more productive and get your homework done quicker so you can do other things, great. But my rules are as follows. You cannot use it for solving math problems because you need to learn the math. Your brain needs to be trained. I think a lot of math is about actually training your brain more than learning how to answer the results. And also for English, you have to learn to read and write well. But if you've got to find something in history, you've got to put together an essay. I'm using it for work now, so you go ahead. So I've given her permission to break the rules.
Yeah. But, job displacement, people were worried about that when the computers were coming out. And there's always doomsdayers, but humans have found ways to reinvent themselves. I think that we will again. I mean, the really doomsday threat model that people are scared about of eliminating humanity. I mean, we sort of alluded to that in the piece that we wrote on Bitcoin and AI is that, well, maybe one way to think about it is that sort of Bitcoin is the limiting factor on AI. And, in this world of, digital infinity where, you just infinite computing power, what serves as the throttle or the bottleneck, it's like Bitcoin's absolute scarcity. So there's, I think, reason for hope in that regard. But from an investor standpoint, no doubt, I think there's going to cause a massive disruption in value to legacy players that don't figure out how to leverage the technology. And there's massive opportunity for those that do, which is why we're very excited about, the company we mentioned earlier with StatMuse, because they're doing some really interesting things. And just like what you've seen in leveraging it in your life, you can do so much more with less. And you can build companies with, much less resources. And what does that mean? It probably means you can get to profitability much sooner, which is a big thing a theme that we think about at 1031 as well. How can you invest in businesses that can become SATs flowing businesses? And old world, we talk about a lot, the old world of, fiat, VC, and growth at all costs. You got to throw that out the window and now start thinking about actually sustainable business models. And AI is going to be a big tool that we think most of our companies are going to be using.
Yeah. And I don't buy into the doomerism over AI at all. I'm very optimistic about it. And
have you not watched Terminator 3?
No, but I did recently watch Terminator 2. And
you've never seen it?
I have seen Terminator 3,
yeah.
But I can't remember exactly what goes on in Terminator 3. Terminator 2, though, at the end, it's sort of an optimistic note on AI. But broadly speaking, not talking about Terminator
3. Terminator 3, the end is when the robots take over.
Yeah. But in this context, like I talk about it in the context of Bitcoin UTXOs, but I think it applies to AI too, which is Jevons paradox, which is the more efficient you become with the resource, in this case, compute, you think it's Jevons paradox. It's a paradox because you think you'll use less and won't need as much of it. But I think as we become more efficient with compute, we'll be able to do so much more. And that's the question of replacement versus making an individual employee more efficient is the question that's yet to be answered. But I have a feeling instead of replacing jobs, that certainly will replace jobs, and there will be a period of disruption. But I do think it's going to turn people, like your average developer, into a 10x developer. And then once you have the average developer turn into a 10x developer, like how much more can be built on top of that? Like I think we're just on the cusp of, we don't even know where this is going to go.
I mean, it's always been exciting being at the forefront doing a podcast, right? You get to talk to the innovators, the most interesting people. I guess you accelerate that by being at the forefront of a fund and seeing what people are actually building and getting to invest in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a theme that I've been thinking a lot about recently, is just like seeing the activity that's happening right now in the ecosystem. People say, well, when was the best time to buy Bitcoin? Well, that was yesterday, but the second best time, conceptually speaking, the second best time is today. But I've been thinking, well, the best time to be investing in the network, actually, it wasn't yesterday. I think it is today.
Right.
I think 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, most of these businesses could not have existed. Lightning Network wasn't around. Now the infrastructure that's being built around that, the tooling, there's now more investable opportunities. Now that we've seen a lot of the flush happen last year with crypto, the liquidity has exited the system. So, there's a scarcity of capital. Valuations have come down. We've seen the signaling from BlackRock with the ETF. So the ETF seems like it's going to be coming, whether it's them or someone else. At some point, that's going to be on the horizon soon. The halving is coming up. Like, we go to all of these meetups locally, all over the US, and it's not like a typical bear market that we've seen in the past where, 10, 15 people are showing up. Like, there's a lot of people showing up. There's a lot of people building, a lot of really cool companies building stuff. And I think right now is like the absolute best time to invest behind that, because more people are coming, more institutions are coming, more capital is going to come in. And as that happens, valuations will reset. They'll likely come up again. But the fact that you can build so much more now, and there's like an interesting time to do it, like this to me is an interesting theme to think about.
Yeah. From a risk adjusted perspective, having been in the space for 10 years, I don't think there's ever been a better time. Like, the infrastructure is more robust than it's ever been. There's more developers than there's ever been. And we talk a lot about like the order of operations necessary to make Bitcoin successful. Early days, you need node distribution, you need hash rate distribution, you need custody products, you need good, boring financial products like collateralized lending. Now with the maturation of the Lightning Network, the emergence of other second layers like Fedimints, like I think we're finally getting to the order of operations where it's like, okay, we're ready for consumer products. Maybe even, we were joking about this earlier, like what if merchant adoption is driven by AI agents? Like it just forces everybody, like the meme of merchant adoption that Roger Ver was pushing in 2013, 2014, maybe it was a good thing to go after, but the timing wasn't right. And maybe now with the culmination of things coming together with the Lightning Network and AI, you can actually force merchant adoption, because again, it will drive higher profit margins for these AI businesses.
There's an analogy, comparison to the internet boom and the dot-com bust, in that there were so many companies that came up with great ideas that weren't ready. I remember there was one specifically, boo.com, which was like do you remember them? They were a fashion retailer, and they used, remember Flash? Remember the websites built on Flash?
Yep.
They used that so you could rotate the outfits and check them all out. But the problem was, a lot of people were still on dial-up or SDN, so you just had to wait ages for it, and people just gave up. Pets.com was another one. All these ideas that seemed interesting at the time, but the infrastructure wasn't there. The internet was too slow. And so we had the big boom and then the big bust, and then the real companies came out of the back of that. It almost feels like Bitcoin's at that almost similar time, similar kind of epoch within its era.
Could be. It's hard. I mean,
we'll see.
We won't know until we'll only know in retrospect, but it does feel like it. Again, having been around the space for a decade, and that's the other thing too. Another massive theme that's going on right now is that Bitcoin is drawing in a lot of talent from incumbent tech firms and finance firms. Like, that's one thing I've noticed in this bear market, unlike any that I've seen before, is the amount of people that get Bitcoin are extremely talented, have built successful businesses, have built successful careers, are jumping ship to come work in the Bitcoin industry in the bear market, because I think they recognize the risk adjusted like risk profile that exists right now. And they're recognizing that, all right, this is a great time to get into Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you've noticed this just making a podcast, but I've noticed like 4 years ago it was libertarians and Bitcoin maxis, but now it's philosophers, it's macroeconomists, it's lawyers. There's all these kind of sectors of people who are coming into Bitcoin to talk about Bitcoin. You know, somebody who I would have on the podcast in maybe 2019 who would be like a huge show, and now has been superseded by like a Lynn Orden or you talk about Whitney Webb or like these newer voices coming in, and you can compare that. Then there's other people. You see someone like, is it George Gammon, constantly fighting against it? He's constantly fighting against it, and it's all these people are fighting against it. They kind of look odd. I don't know. Maybe I have an intrinsic bias, but
yeah, you are seeing people come in to it from all different walks of life, and it's like proof of work is this other theme that I just like I'm obsessed with. And I think about all the different ways to apply the concepts of proof of work and what interesting findings can you have just observing different things. And to me, like I've thought through this idea of proof of work of just people coming into the space and contributing their own skills, like their own experience, their own network. And like, how do you maximize the value that you can achieve from contributing your experiences? And that's like doing something that is unique to you, something where you're the best, your skills and experiences. And my contention is that like providing proof of work to the network, like we normally just think of that as like Bitcoin mining, and you're contributing computing power. And in exchange, you're receiving, Bitcoin as rewards, and it's pretty predictable. It's pretty low risk, like based on, the market hash rate, the Bitcoin price, these factors. Like, what are you going to get in exchange for contributing that proof of work? But I think you can apply it to anything, to any business or any individual, where it's like, well, where do I come from? I come from the institutional investing world. Well, how can I leverage my skills and experiences to try to provide value to the network? And I think there's kind of like this, like in investing, there's, kind of like an investment utility curve where based on the level of risk you're taking, you should be expecting a return to be commensurate for the amount of risk you're taking. And with Bitcoin mining, as we say, it's predictable, it's relatively low risk because you get your payout pretty quickly. But say you're working for a Bitcoin company, maybe that's how you're contributing your proof of work to the ecosystem. Well, how's that benefiting you? Well, you're building a network of people in the space, or maybe you're getting paid, so that's sort of lower risk because you're already getting paid. But maybe you're a developer and you're not getting paid, but you're just contributing to the open source movement. You're still building skills, relationships that I think over time you will be able to monetize in some way. It's the same thing like if you're investing in a business, like that's one way to contribute proof of work. Maybe you're an advocate to policymakers, maybe you're helping build a community. You can start to think through this, that there's lots of ways to contribute to the network with varying degrees of risk, varying time periods over which you might actually receive the rewards from doing that. But I think Bitcoin is this network that will provide you value over time based on the work that you contribute. And so how do you maximize the rewards that you're going to get for whatever work you can do? Or you want to contribute something that's unique to you, because that's where you can achieve the best pricing for what you're delivering.
What about your old finance friends? When they saw you flip to do this Bitcoin thing, how did they react? And are they starting to tap on the door yet and say, yeah, maybe
I'd say it was mixed. One of the more memorable moments was, it was early 2020 and everyone was locked down with COVID. And I was working on a team that was mainly based out of Europe. I was in the US helping lead the efforts of this longer duration fund that we had. But the rest of our team was in Europe, and I was in New York, and we were trying to figure out how do we maintain a culture when everyone's working remotely? And well, let's do a book club, and everyone got to submit their request for like what book should we read. And I was like, should I suggest the Bitcoin Standard? Is there some career risk? How are people going to perceive me suggesting something like this? Because in the private equity world, which is where I came from, people weren't really thinking about Bitcoin. It's unlike, say, a hedge fund, for example. Like if you're at a hedge fund, you might actually be looking at how do you allocate capital across different asset classes? Like, should we be investing in stocks and bonds and real estate? And you're weighing different asset classes off another. In the private equity world, we had a private equity fund. We were buying companies. We were investing in companies. We were holding them for 5 to 7 years or 10 years. And then we were looking to exit. And it didn't matter what macro environment were we in. We were in LPs, pension funds, allocation into owning private equity into companies, and we were expected to invest over like good times and bad. And we didn't, people in that space didn't really think about, well, what's happening in these other asset classes. But I was interested in it. I decided, you know what, I'm just going to suggest the Bitcoin Standard. In the end, no one was interested in it, so we read The Great Gatsby instead. And at the time, Bitcoin was at like $4,000, and I just was thinking to myself, man, these guys, they lost a huge opportunity to just read it. But when I I started investing in Bitcoin companies right around that same time, early 2020, after having just been completely intrigued by Bitcoin for a few years. But it just was opportunistic that there was a couple opportunities to invest in some companies. And then for me, it was a light bulb moment. Like, I want to just keep doing this and keep supporting these companies while I was still working this job. So that was how we were getting 1031 off the ground, was we were making some investments, but I still had my gig at this investment platform. But then fast forward, a year and a half, late 2021, when I finally told them, I was like, I'm going all in on this. It felt like we had struck a nerve, and there was the opportunity that we thought there was going to be, and the time to go was now. A lot of them thought, that makes a lot of sense. That seems really exciting. I've kept up with them, and they're definitely cheering me on. But most people, I find it interesting because they're still not really paying attention to it, and that tells me that it's still very early. Like we continue to be in this echo chamber, but most people aren't really paying attention. Even though Bitcoin is the best performing asset this year, and of course it's down from the highs, but relatively speaking, you would think that more would be paying attention, but I don't think they
will. When it hits 100K, they'll be back.
Yeah. But even the ones that are paying attention, like BlackRock, perfect example. You have Larry Fink on Fox Business News or CNBC last week, like Bitcoin's digital gold. Like, we're going to provide a fund that gives people access to digital gold. He's completely ignorant to the discussion we just had about AI and combining open protocols. Like many people in traditional finance just view it as digital gold as this asset that will just sit there and do nothing. For many people, it will. They'll just use it as a savings account. But on the other side of the asset is the peer-to-peer network and the layers above it that enable so many things that were literally impossible before Bitcoin existed. And people still haven't grokked that yet. So even the TradFi guys that are coming into the space right now, like BlackRock, don't understand what's going on.
It's interesting how every cycle there's a driver in it. Like Saylor was the last cycle with his billions invested in Bitcoin. And I did not have BlackRock down as coming in as being this like narrative lead, which it could be. And look, I think we all agree, fuck BlackRock and don't buy BlackRock and buy Bitcoin and custody and self-custody. We all agree that it's going to happen anyway. And they're going to buy a fuck ton of Bitcoin on behalf of other people and issue their shares. But that narrative shift that it's giving that approval to anyone who's involved in the investment space to go and buy Bitcoin. And it could be a massive driver over the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
Yeah, 100%. No, I felt like when I left, it was the perfect time. There was an opportunity to, to try to build something that I thought was lacking in the space, but also I couldn't have done it. Not just could I not have done it, several years earlier because the interest wouldn't have been there from, capital allocators, but at that time in my career, I wouldn't have had the credibility with institutional investors to be able to do that. So I always had this itch, and it was something that my dad told me, be your own boss. He was his own boss.
Yep.
And that has stuck with me for who knows, when did he first tell me that? I don't know, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, maybe. But it stuck with me. And I always felt like I loved investing. Like I love building the relationships with the companies, and especially after you've invested, because, we would invest in a company and own it for 7 years. And I would build the relationships with the management team, and then you'd sit on the board and you'd work with them, and you'd deal most of the time you thought you knew what you were investing in, but it wasn't until afterwards that you really knew, because you'd go through a diligence period, but afterwards you find out, okay, what do we just buy? And then how do we succeed as a team, this partnership? And I just loved it. I loved the relationship aspect. But I felt like, I didn't fit in perfectly to the culture that we had there. And I always had this inkling that there was something else out there for me. And then, the timing was good to go launch it. After having 15 years under my belt at one of the blue chip investment platforms. So I don't, regret having, been in that world for as long as I did, or being, a suit for that long.
In terms of raising capital, I would be tempted to be an LP in a Bitcoin fund, but there is always that kind of will the fund outperform Bitcoin? The questions come.
Yep.
But there is that altruistic side that exists where I'm like, part of me doesn't give a fuck because you want to be part of this, you want to help. And if the fund's successful, it's driving your other Bitcoin stack anyway. How do you approach that side of things? Because there is a chance if you just put the entire fund in Bitcoin, it would outperform. But does it feel like you're therefore on more of a mission, or have you just got a very good argument against what I said anyway?
No, well, I think the points you make are valid ones. I think an overarching point I would make is that investing in companies is inherently more risky than buying Bitcoin. And so if you price the investments in the companies the right way, they should outperform, because they should be priced to compensate you for that risk. And for sure, if you're investing in an early stage company that's a $5 million valuation and they go on to be $1 billion company or $500 million company, and you make 100 times your money or 200 times your money, will that outperform Bitcoin, that individual investment? Probably, over the time period that we're talking about with an investment in a company. The trick will be, can you do it across a portfolio? Undoubtedly, you're going to invest in some companies that will be wipeouts. I think that in the Bitcoin ecosystem, relative to your traditional venture capital portfolio, traditional venture capital portfolio, you might have, say there's 30 companies, you might have 2 or 3 that are just absolute home runs that make your fund. And then the rest, maybe they're split, I don't know what you might say, but let's just say they're split 50-50, some are middle of the road, and then another 50% of those remaining just are complete wipeouts. I think in this space, you might actually have a higher percentage of absolute home runs just because of the tailwinds that we're riding, being so early in this space. And I also think that you're likely to have a lower percentage of complete wipeouts. Undoubtedly, there will be some, and it won't be because they chose the wrong market. It'll be because they didn't execute the right way, or team dynamics or whatever. I certainly think that you can outperform Bitcoin. Certainly, if you're investing really early stage, you should be able to outperform Bitcoin on a company by company basis. every investment that we do, we have a pretty sophisticated approach to how we construct the portfolio and how we make our decisions. Like as we go through the diligence process and trying to figure out, well, which opportunities are we really excited by, and how do we think, like, what is our plan right now, at least as of today, for that investment? And we document it. We create our own investment memos that outline how we view the opportunity, what are the risks, what are the attractions, the valuation, the expected returns. And that's important because then we can look in hindsight, how was our investment judgment at the time? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? But part of those investment memos, every single one, is here's what we think the expected return is going to be, and here's how we think it will perform relative to Bitcoin. And we have to believe that there is that opportunity. Will you do it? That will be how we prove, that we make money for people and why they should pay us to invest capital for them.
Do you think there'll come a time where you're raising funds in sats, investing in sats, valuing the companies in sats, and the fund closes in sats?
I mean, certainly at some point in the future.
Because then that kind of changes that whole thesis anyway, in that you're not having to think about the dollars.
Well, and that's something we focus on and really try to hone in on with prospective portfolio companies is, do you have a sats flow strategy? Like, are you actually building Bitcoin on your balance sheet? Because that's, again, we do think we're in the beginning of a transitionary phase from a fiat standard to a Bitcoin standard. If Bitcoin is going to be the monetary standard of the world, like, you should be figuring out how to acquire and hold that as an individual and as a company as well. And so that, in terms of finding companies that could outperform Bitcoin, it's if they're providing utility for Bitcoiners and getting compensated in sats that they're able to hold on their balance sheet over time, we think that is an attractive levered play.
Mm-hmm. Sats that's part of the cheat code, right? That's part of the cheat code for any business, is actually holding sats on their balance sheet.
Well, we do that. The podcast, we have a sats flow on the podcast. Any sponsor who pays in Bitcoin, we just leave that in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Have it the football team, any sponsor or any shirts we sell or burgers, we leave that in Bitcoin and we don't touch that. And like I say, the football club's up to 5 Bitcoin now from 0. Mm-hmm. So that I get it.
Yeah. Well, that's part of, as we talk about this idea of like generating some sort of sustainable sats flowing business model, it's because of the inherent deflationary nature of Bitcoin. It's over a long enough time period, of course there's volatility along the way, but the purchasing power of Bitcoin increases. So what are the implications of that? That means that in the future, like let's just say to earn the same amount of Bitcoin, it could be like we all experience it, like buying amount of Bitcoin. It used to be for $1 you could get 5,000 sats. Now it's $1 you can get 3,000 sats or 3,333 sats. Over time, to earn the same amount of Bitcoin, because let's think about it in company terms, it's harder, right? Like it's going to require more dollars or more work. And so there's a trade-off there. Like, think of it another way. For the same amount of work, you're going to earn less Bitcoin in the future. So if you're trying to earn the same amount of Bitcoin, it's going to be harder to earn in the future than it is today. Or for the same amount of work that you might contribute today versus in the future, you're actually going to earn less Bitcoin. So what does that mean? Well, that means that it really highlights the opportunity cost of foregoing Bitcoin that you could have earned today. Like, if you decide you wanted to pour it into marketing dollars, well, why would you do that? Well, you think you're going to earn a return on it. And so I'm going to forego a certain amount of Bitcoin that I could earn today to hopefully earn more Bitcoin than I'm giving up today. Well, that's actually, if we know to earn more Bitcoin in the future is going to be harder, it's really going to highlight the opportunity cost of the deflationary nature of Bitcoin. And so I think the implications are that it forces companies to think a lot more about cash flow and generating profits and generating this sustainable business models. Out of the gate, companies in this space, startup companies, most of them are not profitable, obviously. We have a couple in our portfolio that are, and it points to a future where you have more of these companies that generate profits, and then what do they do with the profits? Well, they could reinvest them back into the business, or maybe it's Bitcoin dividends. And we have some that are doing that as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, the way I think about it in the sets that we hold, especially the football club is a great example, is that does there come a time in the future, maybe 2 cycles time where, that 5 Bitcoin is worth $1 million, 10 million. Can I leverage that for the infrastructure projects I want to do without selling it? Can I go to Unchained and borrow pounds and do what I need and still hold that? And if I can, well, that essentially becomes another cheat code for the growth of what we're doing. I mean, that's just my hope with it, but I don't want to give out the dividends. So yeah, the final thing. So your sectors, Lightning companies, Nostar, some Freedom Tech, AI, and British non-league football clubs. Like, what other? Like, if someone's listening and they're like, "Fuck, I want to pitch you guys. Who do you want to hear from?"
Well, another big category we haven't talked at all about that we invest behind, which I think is unique, is the mining stuff. I think we may have 7 or 8 different mining-oriented investments. Marty's front and center on a lot of those, that whether it's proprietary mining companies that are doing off-grid mining with stranded gas, or it's energy infrastructure for companies that are in the oil and gas fields interested in mining Bitcoin. So some of the picks and shovels around that, but we've done a lot in mining, and that's an area that we think is really interesting.
Yeah. Again, going back to the order of operations of mining, being on the early end of that order of operations, I think 1031 has been one of the few funds, if not the only fund, that hasn't been afraid of the mining industry. And I think that's because we realize that this intersection of the energy sector and the Bitcoin mining industry is happening in real time now. And once that happens, the value that's going to accrue to Bitcoin miners, whether that's prop miners or people building out infrastructure, is going to be pretty insane. Like right now in the mining sector, infrastructure companies that can actually build rack space and build out like electrical infrastructure to actually plug the ASICs in are really attractive, especially in the middle of the bear market, with a bunch of distressed assets out there and ASICs prices being where they are. We think it's a great opportunity to be deploying into mining, particularly behind operators who've been in the space for a long time, because that's the one thing with the mining industry. We saw that last cycle. Very particularly was that a lot of people see Bitcoin mining like, oh, we just plug in these computers and we make a shit ton of money. It's not how it works. Nope. I've been in the mining industry for 5 years now, and there's a lot of hard lessons that I've had to learn over the 5 years. And when we're allocating into the mining space, that's what we're looking for, is people who've been through it. They understand the cycles. They understand mining. Talk about timing in the mining industry. Timing is particularly pronounced, where you really need to be deploying capital and building in the bear markets and being conservative in the roaring bull markets, and
not taking stupid risks.
Yes. And so understanding, my experience having been in it for a while, I think that suits us pretty well to be able to look at the mining landscape and allocate accordingly.
Love it.
Mining is the lowest barrier to entry, I would say, of any of these types of businesses. Anyone can go buy a machine and plug it in. So, the number of pitches that we would get saying, hey, we've got great relationships with the ASIC manufacturers and we got a low cost energy. And here, by the way, our team is, we got finance people and energy people. There's a lot of those because it's just low barrier to entry. We did some stats on the number of opportunities we looked at. I mean, round numbers, we've invested in about 30 companies. We've reviewed probably 500 to get to that 30. So
wow.
It's actually a pretty, relative to venture outside of, Bitcoin, that's, I'd say, a pretty high, hit rate on the number of companies that made it into our portfolio relative to what we reviewed. But then if you broke that down by industry, say mining, the percentage that we did was much lower. We got 7 or 8 in there. We probably looked at, I don't know, 100 mining-oriented investments, so much lower percentage that we've done. And oftentimes it really is just about the people.
And if companies are listening, though, because they might be like, damn, I want to be a 1031 portfolio company, how do they get in touch? Who do you want to hear from?
Well, we're pretty easy to get a hold of because we're all on social media. We've got a website. You can find us there. Feel free to reach out.
Man, honestly, Grant, Marty, I love what you're doing with this. You built a great team, very cool people, great investment. I'm aware of obviously some of your investments, very cool. I love it, man. I just hope you continue to crush it. And if in our little humble way we can do anything to help, always reach out because we would always do anything we can help.
Sounds good. Looking forward to Real Bedford adding to our list.
Maybe, yeah. Fingers crossed.